Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure getting to know many of you. So, as Chris said, my name is Cronin. I work with Passion for Planting. And today, I just kind of want to share a little bit of my story. And I'm not going to teach you anything new. You guys know all this stuff. I'm hopefully just going to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. So, last night, as I sat around the fire with guys from different tribes, different denominations, Southern Baptist, Acts 29, non-denominational churches, Christian Church, Church of Christ, I thought of Psalm 133. Psalm 133, verse 1, that says this: how good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. And I've experienced that this week, and so I just want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. And as Chris said, you know, what I see today around us this week, I see an answer to Jesus' prayer in John 17. That we would be one so that the world would believe. And so my story is, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. Yes, home of the only NFL team to go to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. Okay, lost all four of them, and then we did lose, not make to the playoffs for 17 years. But we're on the up and up. And you know what Buffalo is known for? Wings, maybe some terrible football. For many years, we were known as, you know, the place where churches died. You know, churches did not start. When I was a kid, I was looking around the neighborhood, I was looking around the landscape, and I was like, who is going to reach my generation? I went to high school, didn't really know any Christians, ended up helping start a Bible club. Our group started to grow, and I was like, this is kind of like a new church that we're starting. And in high school, I felt convicted to go into ministry, and so I shipped off to a Bible college in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. And oh yeah, Jeremy. And I remember my freshman year, I looked up, I don't know if I was online, I can't remember, I was home for a break, but I looked at the Buffalo News, the newspaper, and front page was an article that said, when churches close. That was the title of the article, When Churches Close, and it was just talking about all the churches that were closing in Western New York and in Buffalo, and specifically 77 Roman Catholic churches in that number that were set to close in the next few years, amongst many other, you know, mainline denominations. And I will never forget a quote from Joseph Golembeck, the councilman in Northwest Buffalo. He said, what does this tell a neighborhood when all the churches are boarded up? It tells that community that they're not good enough for a church. And so that broke my heart. And that day I took that newspaper article and put it on my dorm room, and I began to pray. I began to pray every single day. I got on my knees and said, God, would you send me back to Buffalo and be involved in starting new churches? Would you send me back to be involved in helping plant more churches? And I prayed that prayer for about a year, 6 months. And then I began really feeling convicted. Like, that's a pretty selfish prayer, Sean. Why is it all about you? Why does it have to be you? And so my prayer changed to, God, would you plant new churches? Would you start new churches in Buffalo? And, well, could I be a part of it? Could I be a part of it? Again, 6 months later, I was like, that's still pretty selfish, Sean. So my prayer changed to, God, would you just start new churches? Like, would you just start new churches in Buffalo? I don't care if I'm involved in it or not. Would you just start new churches in Buffalo? And, well, my junior year, I get to the point where I needed a church planting internship. Just so happened the college I went to came out with a church planting major, so that's what I was studying. I needed a church planting internship, and I was like, I want to go back to Buffalo. Like, that's where I feel, you know, called to go. But there aren't any new churches. So what am I supposed to do, God? So I started applying to churches in New York City and Washington, D.C. But then I just so happened to go back home and Christmas break, and I, again, opened up the Buffalo News. Front page of the city and region section, big bold letters, the chapel to start church and movie theater. Big picture of the Regal Cinemas in North Buffalo. It's big news. I mean, a church starting? That's unheard of. And in a movie theater? That's impossible. That's what everyone thought in Buffalo. Like, yes, it was happening all over the country, but never in Buffalo. And so I'd heard of the chapel. It was this large church in the suburbs. And so I was like, they don't know me. I don't really know them. But I'll call them up. I mean, they're not part of my tribe, but we'll call them up. So I call them up and I say, hey, I'm Sean, and I'm interested in doing a church planting internship at the new church you're starting. And so they were like, I was like, can you just put me in contact with the person who's starting that church? And they said, sure, it's this guy named Breck Cockrell. So they gave me his number, and I called up Breck, and I said, Breck, can I do an internship with you this summer? And he's like, we'll get back to you. And so he goes and he asks all his, the head honchos at the big church, and Eventually he comes back and says, sure, we can't pay anything, but if you just want to kind of sit shotgun and learn from us, you can come do an internship with us. I said, great, I'll be there. And so we're having a great time. I'm learning a lot about church planting. The church is growing, and we end up partnering with some Assemblies of God churches, 2 Assemblies of God churches in our neighborhood. Pastor Jose Robles and John Scherholtz and Ron Thornton. And so they're saying this, at the end of the summer, we're going to put on this thing called the Convoy of Hope. Convoy of Hope. It's a big outreach that Assembly of God's churches do. And so we, had this one Saturday, this big outreach. Several churches come together for it. And, we're doing haircuts for people. We're doing, connecting people with nonprofits, doing free healthcare screenings. And our job, my church's job, the Chapel in Elmwood, we were in charge of the children's ministry. We had set up all these games, and, it was like a carnival. And then we were leading the kids through this little area where they were going to sit down. And then I had 5 minutes to share the gospel with them. And so my leader, the guy that was a family pastor, goes, Sean, this is where you're going to flex your muscles, man, your Bible college muscles. You've got 5 minutes to preach the gospel to them and then lead them in the sinner's prayer. We're going to get some kids saved today. And coming from my background, I was like, okay, so I will gladly preach the gospel. I will gladly preach the gospel, but I've never led anybody in the sinner's prayer before. Shocking, but I'm like, I've never done it before. So how about I preach the gospel to them? I'll tell these kids how they need Jesus. Okay, how we're all in need of a Savior. And what if Mike, this all-star children's ministry volunteer, why don't he lead the kids in the sinner's prayer afterwards? And they're like, okay, but we're going to talk about this on Monday at staff meeting, Sean. So I'm like, okay. So I preach the gospel. Mike leads all these kids in the sinner's prayer, and we show up on Monday. I'm called to the carpet. They're like, what, do you not care about these kids' salvation, Sean? What do you mean you don't lead kids in the sinner's prayer? I'm like, hey guys, you guys can do it. Just when I read the book of Acts, I've never seen anybody say the sinner's prayer before. Where I'm coming from, the way that we do it, kind of standard operating procedure at our church, if someone wants to become a Christian, we teach them to repent and to confess Jesus as Lord and make the profession of faith and to just be baptized. That's how I'm used to doing it. And they're like, okay, that seems reasonable. That seems reasonable. I guess you're not a heretic. We'll let you continue your internship. And so, yes, I finished my internship, ended up doing another internship with them that next summer. They ended up hiring me as their church planting apprentice, and then sent me out to plant another new church. And yes, we got to partner with all of these other churches that were not a part of my tribe, because there was one church in the city, part of my tribe, and it was 20 people, and it just shut down just a couple of weeks after we were getting started. So it's it forced me to get outside my comfort zone and partner with some churches that, hey, we agreed on 99% of our theology, ecclesiology, missiology, and how we did everything. Yeah, there was 1% maybe that we didn't agree on, but I said, let's unite upon the 99 things that we agree on. I mean, it made an incredible difference in my life. It opened up an opportunity for me to be involved in church planting in Buffalo. And when I think about my story, I think about the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, he grows up in Jerusalem, and you know the stories. He's out, he's in Babylon. He hears about the walls of Jerusalem that are in ruin. His hometown, spiritually, it's bankrupt at the time. It's walls lay in ruin, and he feels convicted. He has this holy discontent that he needs to go back home and do something about it. He needs to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And so he goes and he gets permission from the king, and the king sends him back with some provision, with some protection. And then he gets back and he starts rallying the troops. He starts rallying the troops, saying, hey, we're going to build the walls. We're going to rebuild the walls. And so in chapter 3, what do we see? It's just a list of people. Just a list of different names. But not only individuals, it's collections of people. It's priests that get together and work together on different parts of the walls. And it's tribes. It's essentially little churches, little groups of people that unite to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And then in chapter 3, verse 5, it says this. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. What? Everybody's contributing, but Nehemiah points out that the nobles of Tekoa would not go to work. They would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. Why would the nobles not work? Why would Nehemiah make mention of it? If they were maybe old and couldn't do it, it's I think he would give them a pass. But he brings attention to the fact that these nobles will not put their shoulder to the work. Why is it? Why aren't they contributing to the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem? I don't know. But when I've done a little Old Testament history, I realized that in 2 Chronicles chapter 11, Rehoboam had rebuilt, had fortified several towns in Judea. And amongst them was Tekoa. Tekoa had been rebuilt. Its walls had been established. And in Jeremiah 6, Jeremiah says the walls are still there. And so they've got walls. They've got walls to maintain. And they no longer feel the burden to help rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And I know as church planters, we oftentimes feel that way. Like when our walls are down, when maybe our walls need to be built, when we're getting started, yeah, we love all the generosity of other churches. Yeah, would you help us get started? Would you send us money? Would you send us people? The walls in this city need to be rebuilt, and so we accept the help of others, but then all of a sudden we're no longer the baby anymore. We've got our own walls that we need to maintain. May we never be the nobles of Tekoa. You know, when we were planting Village Church, this church that I was sent out from the chapel at Elmwood, which became Renovation Church. They sent me out. We started this church called Village Church, and we were in the Elmwood Village of Buffalo, and I was walking around our neighborhood one day, and I actually met a guy, Pepper, who wasn't a homeless guy. He actually lived down the block from me, but he would collect bottles and cans in order to pay for his alcohol. That's how he, made a living. And so I was like, man, I caught this vision. Says, how do we empower people in our neighborhood? How do we not just give them a handout? How do we give them a hand up? And I have this vision of let's start a community garden in one of the vacant lots in our city, Buffalo. It's one of the poorest cities in America, so it's filled with vacant lots and dilapidated houses, boarded up church buildings. And so I said, let's start a community garden in one of these lots. And so I started praying about it. And about 2 weeks later, my friend Ben Kulik, this secular Jewish guy, he invites me to coffee. And he goes, hey, Sean, I've got this vacant lot behind this one property. Would your church be interested in putting a community garden in it? I'm like, what? Like, have you been reading my prayer journal? Like, what? He goes, yeah, I've already talked with Grassroots Gardens of Buffalo. They will partner with you. They will give you soil. They will give you seeds. I'm just looking for some hands to make this vision a reality. So I'm like, sure, man, let's do it. And so we started this community garden, and we got, the garden up and running. I ended up, sending donation letters out to Home Depot, to all these other organizations. And so we got a shed, we got some tools, we got a little lawnmower to, cut the little grass in our garden. And well, it wasn't within a couple of weeks that all our tools were stolen. We're in the city, everything's stolen, our shed's broken into. So I'm like, dang it, what do we do now? We don't got any money. How are we going to do this? And so luckily, we were connected with other gardeners in the city, and one particular gardener just a couple blocks up, and I knew he's a veteran gardener. He's like a noble in the garden community in Buffalo. So I go up to him and I say, Gail, we're in a bind. We don't have any tools. We don't have a lawnmower to be able to cut the little garden that we have, all the grass in the garden. Do you have a mower that we could use? And he goes, yeah, of course. Come over to my house. So I walked up to his house a couple blocks away, and he's got a shed, he's got his garage just full of garden tools. He's got wheelbarrows, he's got mowers, he's got weed whackers, he's got shovels, he's got trowels, he's got rakes, he's got everything you would want as a community gardener. I don't understand how he didn't get broken into, but he's like the Gran Torino of that neighborhood, so no one's messing with him. So he's like, yeah, Sean, you need a mower? Take the mower. Do you need anything else? I'm like, well, we're going to have a work day coming up. I mean, we could use some, the wheelbarrow and some shovels. Like, whatever you need. Just come in whenever you need it, take whatever you want, and use it. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, whenever you need any tools, just use it. And I said, why would you do that? Why would you be so generous? He goes, because I just want to see more gardens in Buffalo. And I was like, man, I wish church leaders had that same attitude. That we just want to see more churches in our city. We want to see more disciples made. And, we have resources that oftentimes are just sitting in the garage. Oftentimes they're not put to work, and we need to get them out there. We need to be good stewards of those tools. And I love that Graham, he didn't worry about, oh man, what if the mower comes back with a little less gas? What if the shovels come back and got some dirt on it? No, he's like, no, because that's what they're made for. They're not made to be in a garage. They're made to be invested in planting seeds and making fruit. And so at Passion for Planting, we want to come alongside of you and help you do that. We want to partner with you. I love, Mike did such an incredible job about apprenticeship. Thank you for challenging us with the apprenticeship and residencies. If your church needs help with a residency, go see Mike, or you can come see us. We've got a distance residency program that we created so that every church can have a church planting residency program. It's a distance residency program. We've got a guy from Kenya this year. We've got a guy from Belgium, Louisiana. They're all over the world coming together to learn about the nuts and bolts of church planting. They learn ministry and DNA and culture from you on the ground. They just learn the nuts and bolts of church planting from us and from leaders like Mac Lake and Sean Lovejoy and Todd Wilson and Ralph Moore and just people that we have connections with through Exponential. And so we want to offer that to you and say, use it. We've got a lot of free resources. Planter Plan, I know Mike and his crew are using our Planter Plan software. So hopefully the tools that we are developing, you guys can put to work. Harry Truman once said this: it's amazing how much you can accomplish in life if you don't mind who gets the credit.
That's right. Praise God.
Yeah, a couple Octobers ago, October 2019, I had the privilege of going to Ascend Institute think tank in Wheaton College, and Jeff Christopherson was there, Daniel Yang was there, and Daniel was, spouting off all the statistics about 2050 and how many churches we need to plant. And then Jeff Christopherson gets up and he says, there is one city in North America that's actually gaining in their church attendance and how many people are in church on a Sunday, and it's Buffalo, New York. And I was like, what? It was incredible, but I began to see the fruit of those prayers and the work that we were doing because a bunch of people came together and said, it doesn't matter what you call yourself, doesn't matter what denomination you're a part of. We want to give every man, woman, and child repeated opportunities to hear, see, and respond to the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ. And so a few years ago, I was able to be in a room of pastors in Buffalo from all these different denominations. We were able to name over 50 churches that had been planted in the last few years in Buffalo, and we were just getting started. So let me wrap up with this last story. So being from Buffalo, I grew up on Tim Hortons. I don't know, anybody ever heard of Tim Hortons? Okay, a few Tim Hortons fans out there. So yeah, Tim Hortons is like, I don't know, from around here, maybe the Krispy Kreme of Winston-Salem, like that is what it is to Buffalo. Everybody in Buffalo, has to wake up and get their Tim Hortons coffee and donuts and bagels. And, starting in Canada, came over to Buffalo. Tim Hortons, a great hockey player for the Maple Leafs and the Sabres. And so several years ago, in a Tim Hortons drive-through, a long line started to form. It was a December morning. It was a cold December morning. And a car at the beginning of this drive-through said, I'm going to do something generous today. I'm just going to pay for the car behind me. I'm just going to pay for the car behind me. And so they paid for the car behind them. So the next car comes up and, gives the cashier their money. And the cashier says, no, you can put your money away. The car in front of you paid for you. Oh, that was nice of them. Well, why don't I pay for the car behind me? Why don't I pay for the car behind me? And so that's what they did. And then the next car comes up and tries to hand the cashier their money. He says, no, put your money away. Put your money away. The car in front of you paid for you. Same thing happened with the next car and the next car and the next car for over 2 hours straight. 228 cars had their coffee and donuts and bagels paid by the car in front of them. I'm just trying to think about, what was it like to be the cashier when car 229 comes up? Oh, no, put your money away. Oh, great, here we go. No. That's not how it's supposed to end. I'm hoping that maybe there just wasn't a car behind them at that point. I don't know. All I know is that we're not going to be car 229. No, we're not going to receive the blessings of other churches that have sacrificed so that we can continue proclaiming the gospel. Because we are here today because 2,000 years ago, those leaders in Jerusalem and Antioch said, we're going to give our best away. We're going to give our best away because they planted churches, because they made disciples and started churches that started at churches. We are here today and we know about Jesus. And so may that not stop with us. Thanks for letting me share.